Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski, I'll be your host for today. And before we begin, may I just remind you, if you find this podcast useful, interesting, entertaining, somewhat valuable for yourself or others, then please do not forget to subscribe or follow so you can get the updates for new episodes and also make other people see it more, as well as share it with a friend. I think the word of mouth is the most efficient and most valuable way of promoting. And so it would be an amazing gift from you to me if you do consider this valuable to share it with others. Of course, if you'd like to support the podcast in any other way, then please do feel free to follow the link below and see what options are there. And also, if you'd like to just comment or send me an email just to maybe suggest a book that I would like and I should review next year, or maybe you just want to let me know, I'm doing a good job, keep going. That's also very welcome. And of course, thank you so much for all of you that are already supporting the podcast, both financially and spiritually, or maybe morally sometimes with just your kind words. And thank you so much for that, and it means a lot. So in terms of the book for this week, I've thought about it for a while because I didn't know exactly how many episodes I want to do in this special season, let's say, of controversial books. And as you might have noticed so far, not all of these books are as controversial as one could expect, maybe. Some of them definitely have taken the threshold of controversiality to another level, while others, like for example the one from last week, I think wasn't as controversial in the larger scheme of things than, let's say, the one from 3 weeks ago. And so I thought about what other major topics of our time and what other major maybe points of discussion or even disagreement might be encountered by you on the daily basis. And I've observed among my books, the ones that I've been reading recently, I've observed a few themes that might be perpetually important for us to explore. And obviously one of them was money and the financial system. Another one was slightly more on the healthcare and political front. Then I thought maybe we should explore some topics related to our idea of free speech and independence. And this week, I've decided to lean into, once again, the topic of AI. And so that's artificial intelligence. And of course, the technological sort of developments on that front. And if you remember, I'll put the link below for our episode with Mo Gaddat's book, Scary Smart, which was very informative and interesting for me to begin my adventure in understanding a little bit more this space of AI and the developments on that front. And then last month, I've decided to explore the new book by Yuval Noah Harari, whom we've already discussed 2 books of. One was Sapiens and the other Homo Deus. And this one is called Nexus. And basically, in a nutshell, what it talks about, it explores the impact of a network as a way of developing civilizations, and then as well developing, organisms, civilizations, cultures, and what we are experiencing on the daily basis. And the theory or the thesis posed by the book is that everything every aspect of one's life and every aspect of the universe can be perceived as a network of either ideas, related organisms, maybe technologies, and through understanding these networks, we can try to understand and anticipate the developments and their impact on our life going forward, especially in the sphere of technology and artificial intelligence. So I've prepared 3 key topics for you, and yet again, I've recently started to take more notes on my electronic devices, funnily enough. So I'll be yet again looking at the screen from time to time instead of sort of looking down for a piece of paper. But nevertheless, I've prepared 3 major topics that stood out to me as like relevant to our conversation. And before I start, also, I would like to say that the book itself, although very interesting and informative, I did not find as powerful maybe or as compelling as the previous 2. Maybe this is due to the fact that while the previous 2 books analyzed the past in very, grainy detail, this one, although it does analyze some developments and sheds a light on some really, really interesting fun facts and, expands on some ideas that I've not had any chance to observe before and learn about, it seems to me that it's much more speculative than others, maybe because it is speculating about the future. And therefore, I did not find I found the connection to the previous 2, but I found the previous 2 to be much more compelling to myself. But, if I were to say whether or not I would suggest the book to read, I would say definitely yes. Even if you've already read Sapiens and Homo Deus, and you might feel a little bit disappointed after reading Nexus because you will be comparing that book to the previous 2, it's definitely something worth reading, especially if you are interested in learning more about artificial intelligence, the way we can conceptualize our world as a network of networks, and of course, in anticipation to what is yet to come, it might be valuable to explore what Mr. Harari suggests. And so let's see. I'll explore 3 topics with you. I'll shed a light on a few thoughts, and then I'll leave you with an invitation, as per usual, to either contemplate or act upon. And we'll see. As I said, I don't know if it's a controversial topic or not. Whether AI is good or bad, that's probably the controversiality of it. But it certainly is a topic that is urgent, emergent, and very much so touching each of our lives. Just to drive the point home, whenever I am preparing my podcast descriptions, I've noticed that it takes me much less time to train a ChatGPT AI, large language model system online to recreate my usual style, while I just give bullet points of what I want to explore in that either post for the podcast promotion or the podcast description episodes themselves. And that's just one of those things, and there are many more. And during, for example, during my, uni adventure, which I've recently finished, I've also used ChatGPT in rearranging my thoughts and checking for mistakes. So previously I would have gone for like a system called Grammarly or, such tools online, but with writing basically completely being able to use the ChatGPT model, I've basically, whenever I would write a part of my dissertation or a part of a project, I would then copy it into the system and see, kind of ask, spot any mistakes, suggest any changes, and so forth. And you can also prompt the system itself to provide you with tailor-made support, and that was definitely one of the great advantages. And as we've discussed in the other episode about Scary Smart book, there are advantages and disadvantages to it. So let's see where we go. So yeah, our first topic, the one that I've prepared for you, is about the emphasis that Harari places on our success of humanity, let's say, stemming from the ability to create shared fiction. So like shared stories. And this is definitely in line with the many great minds of our times and times before us, suggesting that to tell a great story is to compel others to action. We are emotional creatures, we are logical creatures, and it's all intertwined. So while you might be more inclined to be logic driven, or you might be more inclined to be emotionally driven, it will all be intermingling, and it will all have the effect on, it will all affect the way you perceive and act within the world. And so, the concepts here that maybe just to paint the picture we could think about is, first of all, obviously religion. The only truly unknown thing, whether there is God or whether there is no God. What does that mean, that there would be God? Or, what we believe by definition has to be something we cannot observe in other way, because it's no longer a belief if you have the proof, right? Like physical or visual proof. Similarly, money, the idea of money, and nations, nationality, the idea of nationality, as we've discussed earlier in one of the books. My mind seems to be slipping from which book that was, but we've discussed something that was really quite surprising for me, but also in many ways not. That a nationality as an idea, nation states as an idea, emerged only in the 15th century. So it's yet another story that I am Polish. For example, what does it mean to be Polish? The fact that we have flags, the fact that we have symbols of our culture, of our nationality. And similarly with money, this is maybe the best, this might be the best concept to portray this idea of shared fiction, because money in and of itself would not exist if it wasn't for the shared fiction we give it. So consider this. Let's say that we have a pound coin or a dollar bill. My ability to use this coin or bill in paying you for your service, let's say that I go to the hairdresser to get a haircut, which is obviously I need one right now. My ability to pay the hairdresser to cut my hair is only possible with this bill or with this coin if not only I believe this money to be useful, but also the hairdresser will believe this money to be useful and will be able to exchange it for other, goods or service. And as well, everyone else included in this equation believes it to be valuable and useful. The moment I give a coin to the to the hairdresser, and it turns out that that coin is not, used in the local country or maybe in the world anymore, maybe for the reason that it is actually a monopoly game coin or a bill rather than an actual, pound or dollar, it is basically useless for the hairdresser, right? Or for the barber. So it's like we share this story about money being a means of exchange and means of storing value and means of dividing and pricing our products or services, but it is innately connected to its story for it to be useful. A good example of that is, for example, back in 1989, Poland became, after something like 50 years post-war, under Soviet occupation. In fact, we were basically just occupied by the Soviet Union. The type of money that was used during that time suddenly was called upon to be exchanged, to be first and foremost reduced, because the inflation was so high that my father would pay something like 200 zlotys, which is Polish currency, just to get a lollipop in a shop, or maybe even more. I'm kind of guessing right now, but it was absurd amount, similar to what hyperinflation might do in countries like Venezuela. And so with the new regime, with the new government, came the resolution to change the currency. And of course, to keep people's wealth, people have the time given to them to exchange the old coins for the new. But over time, you will no longer be able to use that old money. And in and of itself, it becomes useless. So that's, for example, if you do live in Britain, you know that over the past, I think, 10 years or so, the government was slowly but surely exchanging paper notes to paper plastic notes. So, for example, £5 note used to be made of paper that was much more easily sort of crumpled and if it got wet, you were at a risk of ripping it. While now £5 notes and £10 notes and £20 notes and even £50 notes are all made of like plastic-like texture, which allows them to be, obviously waterproof, but also much more difficult to destroy, which one could argue is a good idea. The thing is, though, it's an exchange of, it's a substitution of of this item, but without this item's ability and shared belief that I can buy something for this little note, it would probably be rather useless. Like, if you think about it, the value of your coin, the true value of it, not the value that is placed by the fact that it has a purchasing power, the value of it in and of itself is probably much, much smaller. So, for example, maybe a 10-cent coin is probably likely to be worth more like 0.5 cents in terms of production, if you were to just account for it being minted. And, these are funny little things to observe and a fun fact in a way, but it addresses the bigger question here, that these abstract ideas basically enable vast cooperation among strangers, right? And they were the foundation of our civilization. So because we were able to convey in a Bible or in Quran a story that could be shared by everyone or by many, we would agree then on some qualities that we value in people and in ourselves, and therefore in a way we would set up the framework to work together. Similarly, because we have something like money to exchange our goods and services, we can more easily trade across the table, across the border, and across the whole continent, across the world. So, these are obviously let's say, the positive aspects of it. And if you do consider humanity to be of value and you would like to see humanity thrive going forward, then it is obvious that you would argue for these networks to be enhanced. And, in many ways, like even the internet network or us talking here today, the other day I've received the Wrapped update, which I might actually share some of the ideas from before I go for my Christmas break. And basically, it's on Spotify. I bet you've seen it too. As well as Spotify offers the Wrapped sort of update on your listening preferences for podcasters and for artists. It offers a similar review on, how many people listen to your episodes, maybe how many streams, what kind of demographics your audience is. And I also learned that this year, 37 different countries, people from different countries listened to my episodes, which is just wonderful. It's amazing. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that. The point here is that, that's a network in and of itself. And in many ways, for example, from my perspective, it is beneficial for us to have an open conversation. And although this is not an open conversation in a sense that you cannot answer me as I speak to you, in many ways we are having a conversation together when I do share those ideas and you listen and maybe then mull over it and maybe comment or maybe just share it with a friend to chat about these topics, because the conversation does not have to be immediate to still reap the benefits of it, right? I'm benefiting obviously from expanding my arsenal of ideas by conveying them. It's a well documented fact that the moment you teach or you try to articulate yourself in a good manner, you're actually cementing in yourself these ideas, and maybe you're learning how to make yourself even more articulate. And this is probably one of the biggest benefits that I've observed in my experience of podcasting. Now, since these are potentially good ideas, right? The shared fiction and these being able to bring us together, we should also look at the dark side of them, which is obviously that these fictions can be used to manipulate, control, oppress, or harm. And we've seen that across the history over and over and over again. Nazi Germany had a certain story told by Hitler and his, contemporaries that enabled these, drastic atrocities to take place. Soviet Union, with, as we've discussed in the episode about Gulag Archipelago, which I'll try to link below as well if I don't forget. They've also, there was a certain story told and shared, a certain fiction among the party members of the Soviet Union that were ruling the Soviet Union, that enabled these greatly troubling, rather absurdly evil deeds to be done. So while this shared fiction can be something that brings us more abundance and health, joy and wealth and support, it can also bring war and destruction. And these are things that should be taken into account as we dive deeper into this topic, because as you will see, going to the next and then the third topic, the main, let's say the main message from the book is that we should be aware of how these networks work, because these networks might as well become our downfall. And in many ways, I think we are seeing some initial, troubling examples of such problem emergent already, especially in the social media or in the freedom of the media, and so forth. So it's up to you to decide. I don't want to dive too deep into where the world is right now in terms of political stage and whatnot. That's not the point of the episode. But in terms of observing the network being in a way in charge of what is going to happen, we need to be aware that these networks of ideas, these shared fictions, can both make and break civilization, and make and break the world, and make and break our life. So, from examples from history, such as religious crusaders or colonial empires basically justifying their atrocities through a shared fiction of maybe bringing hope, bringing peace. It's bringing culture. The colonialism, the biggest absurd to me of colonialism, but at the same time I can imagine it made sense to them. It always makes sense to you as you do something, unless you realize that what you're doing is wrong, is that in the name of sharing, of spreading culture and civilization, basically colonialists destroyed cultures and civilizations. Just because someone is different or lives differently than you does not mean that you should be or could be the judge of which way is better. And that's the arrogance of those conquistadors or colonialism monarchies and so forth that manifested across the world. Similarly, crusades or quite frankly, religious wars that are still taking place across the globe, which is just, I don't know if war isn't just a perpetual part of human existence. I hope not, but it seems to me that over the past years, over the past millennia, apparently there were less than 20 years without any war, any major war in the world. And major is a big word. There is always some conflicts emerging, and I guess it's just a matter that we have so many different ideas and so many different shared fictions that when they collide, something takes place, and it's usually nothing pleasant. Now, in modern day, for example, and these are just a few examples before we wrap up this point. You are a part of many shared fictions. So, for example, you might consider that a brand that you really like is your brand, And what does it mean that the brand suits you, or you want to be associated with that brand? Let's say you buy a certain piece of clothing because you want to express to the world that this is how you are, this is how you feel. Maybe you wear sporty clothes because you associate yourself with being an athlete. Maybe you like dressing up very nice in very expensive and fancy clothes because you want to be perceived as fancy and elegant. These are all fictional stories. This is a story you tell about yourself to the world. And these are the stories that enable marketing and branding to take place. companies advertise themselves in a way that allows you to either fit into their customer profile or not. And of course, some companies don't care that much about the branding, because maybe, if a company sells flour, it is less likely to be dependent on what age group, what cultural background, and what maybe nationality a person is to buy flour. The majority of us uses flour, and that's just the way we go. But then there are things such as cars or phones or clothes in particular that are very much so deeply relevant to the story they tell about themselves, that allow us to tell a story about ourselves to the world. So maybe if you like, if you're an outdoorsy person, you're more likely to be associating yourself with a big SUV brand that allows you to drive through, any kind of weather and any kind of terrain. And then if you're a bit more on the I like to be perceived as elegant and fast, you'll find one of those luxurious cars that just drive very, very fast and also look like a person of power, a person of influence, let's say. So these are all those shared fictions, those networks of shared stories that enable us to exist in the world. Now, the obvious ethical implication is that as we go forward, these stories shape the way we act in the world and also how the world works. Now, enter AI. Right? So a first question for you here is, consider this. Consider that the internet nowadays is the prime source of information for majority of us. You are, if I don't know, I mean, I even saying this, I do wonder if there is anyone out there now listening that doesn't primarily gain insight into the world from the internet. Thinking about it, even though I do read plenty of books and I do listen to many podcasts themselves are on the internet if you think about it, but let's assume that they are sort of the radio-like equivalent. I still gain plentiful of information from the internet, whether it is from the social media, whether it is from someone sending me a link to see some article, or whether it is just by browsing through the news in the internet, just to maybe inform myself on the state of affairs in terms of elections or in terms of wars or in terms of, I don't know, whatever tickles my fancy at the time. Because the internet now seems to be the primary source of information, in the same way as the Bible used to be the primary source of information for some centuries, and in the same way as books and universities have been the primary sources of information through centuries, internet now, this open source, because anyone can put stuff on the internet and anyone can take stuff from the internet, became this encyclopedia in a way, a source of information. And as we've, explored on multiple occasions, the information is a tool of power in and of itself as well. If you know something and the other person doesn't, you might have the advantage to that other person of knowing this, whether it's something that positively impacts your decisions, or maybe you know of something that will likely negatively impact your life, so you anticipate it in advance and you make changes to correct course. Now, enter AI. In a world where AI, artificial intelligence, is exploring the internet and interacting on the internet as much as we do, and it has the advantage that it does not sleep, how can we make sure that in the future the stories that we see on the internet and the stories that we end up sharing among ourselves are not generated by the artificial intelligence? And this is a big conundrum, because we can already see multiple, online trolls or bots taking part in the political discourse or in the computer sphere. At this point, you can have deepfakes, which are basically videos. Let's say that someone just downloaded one of my videos, put it into the video making AI, and then you enter the or maybe you ask the AI to generate the text, and they might even be able to animate my face in a way that it will be almost impossible to see the difference between me right now talking to you and this AI generated episode. Of course, there are many ways in which we might be able to safeguard our identity in the future, and that's a very interesting topic that maybe at some point we'll discuss in the future, about using blockchain technology, the technology behind Bitcoin, for example, to validate our online presence, let's say, to prove that who is speaking is actually Wojtek and not some AI generated image. But for the time being, at the moment, while we have AI participating already in the online discourse and learning about the world ultimately, and interacting with the world through the internet, we have no safeguard railing for this technology. And this is something that Elon Musk has been calling on to raise attention about, basically suggesting that it might bring our downfall if we allow this new, very, very powerful technology that does not sleep and is able to communicate, which is ultimately what shared fiction is based on, to participate in our life. Now, the second topic, before I come back to this question and explore that further, the second topic that I would like to point your attention to is the increasing bureaucracy and the way it creates intersubjective realities. Intersubjective realities basically is this way, this word maybe that this, I don't know, concept that Yuval Noah Harari shares in the book, which are like the realities that are not fully founded in the reality as we know it, this reality, rather they are sort of intertwined with it. So for example, ownership. Me owning this phone, how do I ensure that I own it? Because maybe I have a contract, which is a document, ultimately a shared fiction, because if suddenly my document, which says that I live in this place and I have a phone contract, is no longer perceived by others as true, then my flat can be taken away from me and my phone can ultimately be potentially stolen or taken by force from me and given to another person. So ownership, while the concept itself is not true, in a sense it's not, it's a figment of our imagination, because we all share it, it becomes a part of this intersubjective reality. So we can all observe that we are, for example, the citizens of a certain country because there is an intersubjective reality of a government keeping documents and records about us being there. And this is the problem with bureaucracy. The problem, and obviously, again, this is an upside and downside of bureaucracy, that while bureaucracy basically transformed the way we arrange ourselves in the world. By creating documents, laws, and records, we can create these intersubjective realities which allow for, more order. They allow more efficient organization, but at the same time, they can lead to loss of adaptability and also dehumanization of the whole situation. So, a big part of it, something that again and again is explored in science fiction sort of movies such as Terminator or Deus Ex Machina. Technology has one big the one big difference between a computer and us as a person is that the computer, at least for now and probably ever, is not able to feel emotions. So if the algorithm with which that that program or that computer or that robot runs, this allows a certain behavior. For example, let's say that the computer is a police officer, while a normal, human police officer might be able to empathize with our struggle. Let's say that I've stolen something from the shop and I was caught, and it turns out that I'm basically dying of hunger, and it was my last the action of last resort, and I've stolen because I really need to feed myself because I'm gonna die. Potentially a human police officer, while they might still follow the rules to the extent that I will get maybe put in prison or something, they are likely to empathize with our need to eat, and they might be able to feed us and whatnot, or at least alleviate some pressure from that sentence because of this. This will not happen if the algorithm that is within this robotic police officer, let's say, in our story, does not allow for any deviation from the norm, right? The law is you don't steal, no matter what. And you cannot compel an emotion of a technology that does not have emotions. In a similar manner, you cannot compel bureaucracy in the same way as you can compel a person and get the person to empathize with you. So while right now bureaucracy is a part of all of our lives at all times, you're probably getting at least 10 different letters a year from local constituencies, maybe local council, some bills for tax and whatnot, all of those things. That's all bureaucracy. And while in and of itself it might not be negative, because it becomes a rigid form of keeping track of things, it can be taken advantage of, for example, by, let's say, destroying the whole server of information about, let's say that you have a bank account and suddenly someone wipes the servers of your bank, and so it turns out that you no longer have the money you thought you have. Or maybe someone deletes your citizenship status from the system, and now suddenly, according to this shared intersubjective reality of bureaucracy in your country, you're no longer legally living in your country. In the same manner, these interactions on a smaller scale, at the moment they're still with people, but with the emergence of AI and its use, especially that it's cheaper and more efficient to have an AI accountant, for example, let's say into the future. Funnily enough, I'm training to be an accountant, so it's a funny thing to consider, but I could imagine 10 years from now that there will be chat GPTs dedicated to accounting and to auditing and to financial advice. And while I might be able to speak with a client of mine with empathy and with a certain level of agreement on how to act so it is both beneficial and moral, the AI accountant might simply not respond to ideas or to ways of acting that are outside of this strict bureaucratic algorithm that it has been entered. So obviously the critique here of democracy, of bureaucracy, the critique here of bureaucracy and of it being captured more and more potentially in the future, yet again as a speculation by systems, is that it will reduce people to numbers and categories, which was very much so the case in the Soviet Union, and therefore lead to more and more trouble for the everyday living person. You know, it's a difficult conundrum we find ourselves in, because on one hand we're so reliant on these systems, on the other hand we know that they are in many ways inefficient. You know, if you are from the United States, you will know it the best. Apparently the federal there are something like 400 something federal agencies in the United States, which basically means there has been more than two developed a year since the founding fathers founded the United States. And these federal agencies are obviously not the most efficient. You don't have to look far. In Poland, the Polish bureaucracy and bureaucratic machine is obviously inefficient as well. I don't think there is any country worldwide that can truly and honestly say that their bureaucratic system works flawlessly, because it's very difficult to make big organizations work flawlessly when the company, because in a way it is a company, is not driven by profit, which is an interesting point to note, maybe something that you would like to discuss with your friends and with your family. But the difficulty where there is no incentive to make things more efficient is that it is more likely that these systems over time will become more and more inefficient. You know, by definition, if we're trying to become more efficient, we're likely to slow down or cancel the entropy, which obviously takes place at all times. Entropy is this law. The law of entropy is this fact that this physical observation that in general in the world things tend to lean and go over time more and more into chaos. So things fragment, things disappear, things become dusty. For example, a good example of this, and sorry for this tangent, but I think it's relevant to the point. If you don't clean your flat for a year, even though you might have not used it, you will find loads of dust everywhere. So one would say, like, where is this dust coming from, right? I've not lived in that place for a whole year. How come there is dust? And maybe even better, let's say that you are still living in the flat, but you are never cleaning. You're only using the flat, but you're never cleaning it. You'll see that over time, chaos prevails. It's just a matter of the way things are. If you don't actively take part in cleaning your space, there will be more and more dirt everywhere, and this is the idea of entropy in like the most menial of examples. In the example of bureaucracy, let's say, being inefficient and rigid and likely to become worse and worse over time. In the same manner, if every now and then you don't make conscious effort of bringing it to be more efficient or of cleaning up the dirt, it will just pile up, and at some point you'll find yourself swamped with a mess, basically. And now, the obvious trouble here is that, as we discussed, AI, if anything, is greatly efficient, is much more efficient than human beings. You know, a chatbot is not distracted. A chatbot does not have feelings. A chatbot does not need a break to go pee or to eat or to call a friend. And chatbot doesn't have bad days in terms of, you know, oh, my friend's cousin had a bad day and they called me and now I feel down, so I'm gonna stay home. Or maybe I'm just feeling a bit down today, so I'll stay home. I won't go to work. Because of it, especially in such a inefficient area, and area that is prone to being corrupted by people trying to gain more and more power and drive a totalitarian state, let's say, for example, technology and AI might become a way of the leaders of that system enhancing the efficiency and effectiveness of the system, but also it will inevitably drive more and more decisions being made by algorithms instead of people. And as we said earlier, and that's a question for you, it's not obvious for me that I would like to be judged by an algorithm rather than another person. For example, when I'm applying for a loan for a house, or when I'm deciding whether or not to choose a certain travel arrangement, or whether or not I can even become a citizen of a country. Or maybe, let's say that I've broken some sort of a law locally and I'm in front of the judge, and it turns out that nowadays it's no longer a human judge with human jury. Instead, it's an algorithm, and I'm given the sentence straight away without being able to portray my case in a manner that might be compelling and alleviate some of the pressure of the sentence of myself. So, you know, these are the troubles that might dawn on us as we expand the algorithmic networks being in charge of our lives. And one big thing that Yuval Noah Harari points out that really spoke greatly to me is the trouble behind behind the algorithms themselves. That, let's say that I bought a certain car, and I'm gonna tell you why I bought it. So I bring up some reasons, I explain what are the benefits of having that car, and thanks to that, you understand on what basis did I make that decision, right? You understand my motives. Let's say that I like cars that are big, so I can bring more things with me. I like cars that are efficient on gas, so I don't have to spend too much on it. And let's say that I like them to be red because I like color red. You know what was the let's say the framework that allowed me to purchase that car. And if you are asked by a friend of yours, why did Wojtek buy that car, you can easily explain why my decisions were made. And so this is a transparent part of being human, that if we are truly explaining why we're doing what we're doing, it's very easy for us to figure out why something happened, why someone did something, or how did the decision become a decision. This is not the same for algorithms. And this is something that Mr. Harari points out in the book, that because algorithms are by design in many ways obscure to the user, we don't know exactly, we might not be able to understand later on what was the reasoning behind the decision being made. We might only see the final result. So, especially if I have no way of asking the person who designed the algorithm to begin with, how did they design it, it will be likely difficult for me going forward to understand why such a decision was made. And even more so, that the bigger troubling thing about this is that as AI develops more and more, AI in and of itself will become a part of the training process. So you will add an additional layer of information that will be completely unknown to both the original maker and the end user, and might be only understandable by another algorithm. And so suddenly one artificially intelligent being and another artificially intelligent being are making decisions that will affect our lives without us being able to understand how these decisions were made. And this is a very troubling thought. An experiment that was done, and I don't remember right now exactly let's see, maybe I've taken a note of that as well. Just a second. Yeah, no, I don't know if I have this here, but well, anyway, I'll explain as much as I remember, and if you read the book, you can explore it further, or you can look it up. So apparently there was an experiment done which was called the paperclip experiment, and basically they trained an artificially intelligent large language model to provide them with solutions on how to make the most efficient production of paper clips. You know, clips that you use to clip pieces of paper together, maybe, or just organize your notes. And it turned out that over the time of the experiment, the algorithm that was, interacting with the scientists became more and more prone to completely wiping out humans from the surface of Earth, because it came to a conclusion that we are actually a problem and are standing in the way of making more and more paper clips. So, the idea here, this concept of an experiment, is that simply because the goal, the aim of the algorithm was to make more paper clips, and that was considered the highest value, some things that to us seemed obvious, because if I say to a friend that I want to start a company to make paper clips and to make them as efficiently as possible, because we have an innate belief that human life is of great value, of the utmost value, we will not even consider producing paper clips in a way that would compromise the health and well-being of humans. This is not actually an obvious choice for an algorithm which simply did not get the info about human beings being ultimately essential to the planet. And so, potentially, if such algorithm was actually let loose on the world, who knows, maybe we would become simply annihilated by this new system that simply wanted to make more paper clips. And this is the idea in a nutshell, right? The innate values, morals, and our shared fiction that we as humans might share and consider to be an obvious part of our existence might not necessarily play a part in an algorithm which was either designed by someone who did not remember to place these information equations into the algorithm program, or over time, because the algorithm was developed by an AI with an AI, by another AI with another AI, we will no longer be able to anticipate what the outcome will be, and we will not know on what basis these decisions are made. And that is, my dear listener, a very, very troubling idea for myself. And you know, quite frankly, the biggest one from the book that I found absurdly reasonable to be made, which is another reason why I think this is such a big topic that should be discussed ultimately. Now, the final straw in our conversation is about the double edging of the sword of information networks and AI. So obviously, as we have seen and as we observe on the daily basis, at this point the internet is a tool, and it can be a tool to bring information that is valuable and brings peace and health and wealth, as well as information that is valuable in a way that it brings chaos and potentially destroys lives and so forth. Propaganda, misinformation, disinformation, all of these buzzwords that you might hear. Since we are emotional creatures, and since we are drawing so much from the information available online, and since we are such willingly uploading so much of our information onto the web, we can only imagine how much potential for power and manipulation of us could have AI in the future, would it be present in the information network called the internet space. And basically the idea here is that as we go forward, and we've already seen it, by the way, you know, these are some just absurd examples that I wanted to point your attention to, and please feel free to educate yourself on these points, because you know there is just so many. I don't want to dive into too many of them, but the problem with an open source information, let's say the advantage first. The advantage of open source information is obviously the fact that if someone tells something that is not true, someone else can correct them. And that's great. That's basically free speech. At the same time, the other side of this is if someone says something correct, nothing stands in the way of someone saying something true that will ultimately supplant the information, right? This is basically telling a lie. If you tell a lie 1,000 times, it becomes the truth. That's the proverb, that's the saying that I've heard again and again in my life, and I think it still holds true. This is the danger of replicating fake news or replicating fake information. Over time, because we are bombarded with so many emotionally driven, potentially fake stories, it's very difficult for us to decide and discern which is true and which is not. And over time, it will become even more difficult, because since it will not only be humans, but also AI participants participating in the discourse online, we might find ourselves being in a really tight spot in terms of what is true and what isn't. And rewriting history in terms of changing the facts to a better fact over time is also a part that governments and organizations and people play. As much as you might want to believe that that's not true, I mean, I'm sorry to say, but why wouldn't it be true? If some story is uncomfortable for the local regime, or if some truth about a situation, person, event, whatever, is no longer helpful for the local government or for the local celebrity or for the local whatever, they might be inclined, and I would dare to say they are inclined, to change it, or to maybe make it go away, maybe to swamp it with other fun facts that will disallow you to see the truth. And this was starkly presented on one of the AI systems, and now I don't remember exactly, so I don't want to lie to you here, but one of the systems, such as ChatGPT, another one, was asked to show an image of a group of Nazi soldiers, right? And because of the training it was offered by its makers, and because of its basically propaganda that was fed to it in the stages prior to that prompt, the image of Nazis that was generated was very, very, very far from the truth. So the truth is, if you know the history of Nazi Germany, that basically the Aryan race, the idea that they had was that the Aryan race, which is usually blonde, white, people, such as myself, although apparently I'm not blonde anymore, definitely much more blonde than me. They were the Übermensch, so basically the superhumans, and everyone else was below them. So they obviously discriminated against all other nations and all other cultures and all other backgrounds and races. Now this AI generated image, because of the propaganda that the system was fed, generated an image showing a bunch of multicolored people. And if you are looking for an image that is gonna show the truth, then that image is definitely not the one. If you are looking for an image that will show your new truth, because maybe you have the some weird agenda of reshaping the way we remember the atrocities of the Second World War and Nazi Germany, then you might want to generate that image and propagate it across the world. Now, this is the problem. Since AI is not emotional, and since it is very easy for us to be manipulated and predictable to AI going forwards, because there is so much information about the way we act on the internet, and obviously, our phones, our laptops, all of these things are in a way listening to us, because many of them already have some sort of AI and data collecting software within them. Over time, these potential AI celebrities or AI politicians might be able to manipulate us by showing us the new truth, and by taking advantage of our, psychology and our behavioral tendencies, point us in a certain direction. And, the best example here is obviously the emotionality of politics. Politics in any country, I know the majority of you, my dear listeners, are from the UK and US, so I can relate this particular example to US, for example. politics in and of itself does not necessarily have to be emotional, but it is very emotional because the easiest way, the simplest way to compel people to action is through emotion. You don't have to understand logically what is being said to be angered or to be amazed or to be, feeling the awe of someone's amazing articulative speech. And the funny thing about this all is, some studies have shown that, for example, people are more likely to vote for the president if the president has a good haircut, or if they are of a certain age, or if their smile seems genuine. These are all things that are very subjective and very emotional. They're not necessarily relevant to someone having to rule the country, right? At the same time, we're much less compelled to vote for someone that looks really timid, and they might be the genius that we all need, but because they are so shy and timid, they will, first of all, never go into politics, and even if they were, they would fall off the wagon on the first confrontation, simply because their character is not suitable to what the public wants to see. And this is the example from politics being placed into our grander conversation here, that over time, AI being the ultimately not emotional being can take advantage of our emotions and potentially spread misinformation, flood the internet with nonsense that over time will become the truth, because my future children and their children's children and so forth will be likely learning from the internet. And so if the first page on Google, for example, when typing in Nazi Germany, will show multicolored group, having a meeting on the moon, few generations down the line, that might be the history people know. And, and there is a saying, history is written by the victors. And this basically relates to the fact that history is very biased, because you don't learn about the history of all those people in the past that didn't prevail to write their story down. If there was a Caesar that was not liked or not feared and did not leave a legacy that would then be either scribbled down or propagated through stories down the centuries, then even though that Caesar might have been a big part of the Roman Empire, we will never know about them. And so in a similar manner, if there was a country, for example, fun fact for you, and I'm sorry, I feel like I've been, let's check what the time, oh my god, I feel like I've recently started to make longer and longer episodes, so I'll wrap it up, I'm sorry, but funnily enough, not funnily maybe, but it's a fun fact nevertheless, Poland was off the map for 123 years. And upon the end of the First World War, we sort of came back onto the map for some time. Imagine that we would not come back on the map, and over the next 100, 200, 300 years, our history would be wiped out, maybe simply by not being propagated, maybe simply by everyone from Poland being exterminated. It is possible to change the history in that way, and history is written by the victors. And so if AI will become the victor of our era, who knows what will be taught in schools, if there will be any schools, going 200 years forward. So obviously, these are the dangers, and the obvious question here is like, how do we avoid the totalitarian state? For example, the social credit system in China, or AI controlling citizens and rewarding conforming to the norm, whatever that norm is. And I guess in many ways we cannot right now answer these questions. We can only be more and more aware of these troubles and have those conversations and maybe push our governments and local regulators to fight back on these ideas. So, I don't have a solution here to these issues. In many ways, these are things that to me are very new and somewhat troubling. But at the same time, in the spirit of what Scary Smart book by Mo Gadat talks about, there is still hope. There is always hope. It's just a matter of whether we act in a way that preserves our ultimate values and qualities or not. And so, in a way, it's a matter of whether we will still be in the future, human race will still be the victors of this conundrum. So, I don't know. I don't know what you think about it, and I do wonder. So, thank you so much for this, and sorry for waffling on. I hope this was useful, and please do read the book, because I think in many ways, if you read this book, you would also explore these concepts in much greater depth than my ignorant mind can only attempt to do so. In terms of the invitation I have for you this week is a very simple one. I would invite you to have a conversation with a friend or with a family member about this topic. Maybe simply just to see whether they've thought about the impact of AI on the future and the impact of the connection and the networks that we are all a part of, whether on the internet or, as a country or as a global trade network. And try to explore the question of how could we ensure that at least ourselves, in the smaller scale, me, Wojtek, and my immediate surrounding, my immediate family, my girlfriend and so forth, how can we ensure that whatever the future holds to us in these, in these spheres, we are educated enough or prepared enough to balance out the potential negatives. And I think that's ultimately, I think that's basically the message of the podcasts of all kinds and information, that the best way, it seems to me, to explore these ideas is to talk about them and to educate yourself about them. So I would invite you to have that conversation, and maybe you will be surprised to note that actually that person with whom you'll be chatting actually thought about it. I've recently found it very, very surprising to learn that basically, 5 or 6 major topics that I've been exploring for the past few months seemed to be on the mind of my father, my mom, and one of my friends quite consistently. And, it's heartwarming, if anything, and hopeful to learn that. It definitely makes you a bit more peaceful and at peace with the fact that these activities and changes are taking place. And maybe in many ways we can prepare ourselves for them. And so, I hope that this is an invitation that tickles your fancy, as they say. So, Thank you so much for your time. Sorry that I've waffled for so long. I hope this was useful. If it was, please follow, subscribe, share it with a friend, and, support the podcast. It goes a long way. Nevertheless, thank you so much for being, and thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.